The sun glared harshly through the glass doors of a bustling downtown bank as an old man with a limp stepped inside. His worn boots tapped against the pristine marble floor like an out-of-place memory in a room full of forgetful luxury. His coat was military green, faded from the sun and time, and his hands were calloused, the kind that spoke of wars fought far from home and burdens carried without complaint. The man, Elias Vance, looked around quietly, clutching a weathered wallet as he moved toward the line. Nobody noticed him at first, until he reached the teller's counter and pulled out his veteran ID card to withdraw funds. The young bank clerk, no older than 24, barely glanced at it before letting out a quiet laugh and waving a security officer over. "Sir," the clerk said mockingly, "this ID doesn't even have a chip. This looks like something you printed at home. You can't just walk in here and pretend to be a veteran." The laughter was soft at first, with snickers from behind the glass dividers and a few giggles from a line of well-dressed customers. One of them even pulled out her phone, muttering, "He thinks he's a war hero or something." The security guard, tall and muscular with arms folded like a nightclub bouncer, leaned over. "Let's not waste time, sir. We've got people with real business here, unless you want us to call someone." But Elias didn't flinch or yell. Instead, he simply nodded, reached slowly into his pocket, and handed over a second ID. The security officer scoffed, uninterested, and waved toward the exit. "Come on, let's go." Just then, the bank doors swung open again. The room hushed as a man in a sharply pressed Allied Defense Forces uniform strode in. The stars on his shoulder glinted with such authority that even the security guard took a step back. He was flanked by two aides, and every movement he made exuded command. Customers froze. One whispered, "That's General Thompson, 4-star General Thompson." The general scanned the room like a hawk before his eyes landed on Elias. For a moment, time stood still. And then it happened. In front of the stunned employees and gawking customers, General Thompson snapped into a rigid formal salute, a full, textbook salute reserved for the most honored. "Sir!" he barked with reverence, his voice echoing through the marble chamber. "It's an honor to see you again." The bank went silent. The laughter was gone. The clerk's face turned pale. The security guard's hands dropped from his belt. The general walked up, his eyes firm with emotion, and grasped Elias's hand like a long-lost brother. "I was a lieutenant under your command at Fortress Echo. You saved my life in '69. I never forgot." Elias said nothing at first, just nodded gently, his eyes a little glassy. But General Thompson turned and faced the entire room. "This man," he declared, "is Sergeant Major Elias Vance, Crown of Valor recipient, 2 silver stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and the only man I ever saw drag a wounded soldier 5 miles under fire just to save him. You don't laugh at his ID. You learn from it." Silence. Then someone clapped. One person at the back, a young father with a child on his hip, started clapping, then another, until the whole bank echoed with applause. Elias didn't say much. He never did. But as the teller, now trembling, processed his request with robotic urgency and the security guard stood rigid like a cadet, Elias looked back at the general. "You didn't have to do that." General Thompson smiled. "No, Sergeant Major, I had to. You taught us never to forget our own." As Elias exited the bank, the customers parted for him like a red carpet. A young man approached and stammered, "Sir, could I shake your hand?" Elias obliged briefly and walked off down the sidewalk, his boots once again tapping rhythmically on the concrete, carrying the weight of battles long fought and now, finally, recognized. But the story didn't end there, because outside the bank, someone was watching. A teenage girl with a camera and a large social media following had captured the entire moment on video. That night, the clip went viral. Millions watched as a quiet, aging veteran was laughed at and then saluted by one of the highest-ranking officers in the military. People cried. People apologized. Veterans across the country shared it. But Elias didn't know. He was home, sitting quietly in a small apartment filled with dusty medals and framed black and white photos, sipping his coffee and listening to the old radio play a tune until the door knocked and everything changed. The knock at the door was soft but deliberate, like someone unsure whether they were disturbing a man or entering a shrine. As Elias Vance slowly rose from his kitchen chair, the creak of his knees met the distant echo of the radio, still humming a low country tune. He wasn't expecting anyone, not on a Thursday, not ever really. Life had long since quieted down, reduced to folded laundry, quiet mornings, and the occasional Veterans Aid appointment that he never complained about. As he opened the door, he found two strangers standing there. One was a woman in her 40s, with a press badge clipped to her blouse. The other was a young man with a camera who nervously waved and blurted, "Sir, you're a national hero, and the entire country knows it now." Elias squinted, confused, until the woman held out a tablet and played the viral video. There he was, clear as day, standing in the middle of the bank lobby, looking tired but proud. And there was General Thompson, saluting him, then addressing the room with thunder in his voice. "Why are you showing me this?" Elias asked, not unkindly, but with the steady suspicion of a man who had lived through decades of being forgotten. "Because," the reporter replied gently, "America didn't know who you were yesterday. Today they can't stop talking about you. You're trending on every platform. They're calling you the Silent Lion. Veterans are saying you represent all the forgotten warriors who never got their salute." Elias didn't smile, not yet. But he stepped aside and let them in. Over black coffee, with sunlight pouring through lace curtains, he answered their questions slowly, quietly, never bragging, never exaggerating, just facts. The winter offensive, the convoy ambush outside Port Dang, the midnight rescue where he carried 2 soldiers on his back under mortar fire. His voice was like gravel, worn, slow, but deeply certain. When they left, he figured that would be the end of it. But by the weekend, it had only begun. The governor called, so did a senator, then the Ministry of Defense. And when the president himself recorded a public statement calling Elias a symbol of silent courage, even Elias had to sit down and take a moment to breathe. But it was what came next that made his old heart stir. The military invited him to a ceremony, one of those grand public events at the National Cemetery where cameras roll and politicians shake hands. But Elias declined. He had no interest in medals, flashbulbs, or applause. "If they want to honor me," he told the reporter, "let them do something for the men who didn't come back." Instead, a private ceremony was arranged. And one morning, as the sun rose over the dew-covered fields of the National Cemetery, a handful of men in uniform gathered by a new marble bench etched with 5 names: Elias's Lost Squad. The memorial, funded by anonymous donations, was installed in Elias's honor, but bore only the names of the fallen. Elias stood there alone at first, then with General Thompson beside him. Both men silent, no speeches, no fanfare, just a final salute from one warrior to his brothers. But the story still wasn't done, because a week later, as Elias waited in line at the Department of Motor Vehicles of all places, another man approached. A tall man in his 30s, wearing a sheriff's uniform. "Mr. Vance," he asked softly, "my name's Sam. I was in that bank when they mocked you. My son saw the video later. He asked me what a hero looked like. I told him I met one once, but didn't recognize him in time." Elias simply nodded, and Sam added, "I'd like to shake your hand now, properly." He did, and something shifted, because it wasn't just Sam. It was the nurse at the Veterans Aid office who offered him extra time, the high school principal who invited him to speak, the airline attendant who upgraded his ticket without asking. One by one, strangers started treating him not like a relic, but like the living reminder of something sacred. Still, Elias never changed much. He kept his old boots, still walked 3 blocks every morning to the same diner, and still ordered black coffee and eggs over easy. But now he wasn't alone. Veterans began showing up. Young soldiers brought their kids. One night, a teenage boy left a drawing on Elias's table, a pencil sketch of a saluting soldier with the words, "Thank you for walking so I can run." And maybe the most surprising moment came at a quiet town hall meeting where Elias invited without. Warning stood before a crowd of city leaders and was asked what he wanted. A park in his name? A street? A scholarship fund? He looked at the microphone, shook his head, and said simply, "Make it easier for a veteran to get a job, to be heard. That's the honor I'd ask for." They did. The Vance Bill passed the following year, ensuring veterans in the state would have streamlined access to employment, counseling, and housing aid. Elias didn't ask for credit. He just kept walking those 3 blocks every morning, watching the sun rise like it owed him nothing. Then, one day, without fanfare, the same bank where it all began installed a plaque near the entrance. It read, "To the quiet hero who taught us respect, Sergeant Major Elias Vance." He never walked into that bank again. Not because he held a grudge, he didn't. He just didn't need to prove anything anymore. And every time someone brought up that viral video or the general's salute, Elias would chuckle and say, "One salute doesn't change the past, but it can sure wake the future."